A mansion wrapped in silence. A boy who hasn't smiled in months. A mother fighting battles money can't win. And then, a stranger slips in where she doesn't belong. What begins as an intrusion soon unravels into something no one saw coming. A moment that will test grief, shatter pride, and spark a decision that changes everything. But is this a blessing in disguise, or the beginning of another heartbreak? Welcome to the Judge Stories, where every tale carries a twist. Please subscribe to help us grow, and tell us in the comments which country you're watching from. The gates of Chief Obina's mansion gleamed like gold under the Lagos sun. From the street, it looked like a palace of joy, its white walls spotless, its gardens trimmed as though waiting for a wedding. But behind the beauty, silence reigned. Inside, the air was heavy. Curtains hung low across tall windows, shutting out the light. Chandeliers sparkled above empty spaces, and the echo of footsteps sounded louder than it should. It had been this way since the accident, the night when life had been torn apart in a single crash. Chief Obina and his daughter Chinaza had not come home. Only Chinedu, their 13-year-old son, returned, broken and bound to a wheelchair. In the early days, visitors came in numbers, filling the compound with condolence speeches and prayers. Now the house stood mostly empty, servants moving quietly so as not to disturb the widow and her grieving child. Ngozi sat on the edge of the sofa in the family sitting room, her wrapper folded tightly around her waist. The once radiant woman now dressed in muted colors, her face free of the makeup she used to wear with pride. She watched her son near the window, his thin frame slouched in the wheelchair. Chinedu's eyes followed nothing. He stared out at the garden where he and his twin had once played, chasing each other around the palm trees. Sometimes his lips moved as though speaking to her, but no sound came. Weeks had turned into months and still he refused to laugh. "Num," Ngozi whispered softly, using the endearment she had always called him. "Please talk to me." But her son did not turn. She had tried everything. Specialists from Lagos, Abuja, even overseas. They had prescribed therapies, medications, and endless bills. Nothing restored his legs and nothing touched his spirit. Every night when the house finally went quiet, she wept in her room, clutching a photograph of her late husband and daughter. The wealth Chief Obina had left her could buy cars, land, and more servants than she needed, but it could not bring back her child's smile. The house was alive with riches, but dead with sorrow. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the marble floor, Ngozi closed her eyes and prayed under her breath. "God, if joy will ever return to this house, let it be soon." Outside, unnoticed, the world bustled on. But within the mansion's walls, time felt frozen, a family trapped in silence, waiting for a miracle they could not yet see. On the other side of the city, far from Lekki's shining mansions, stood a crumbling orphanage. Its walls were cracked, the zinc roof rusted, and when rain poured, water streamed down the dormitory walls. Inside, children huddled on iron bunk beds with thin mattresses, their eyes wide with hunger. Among them was Ada, a slender girl of 12 with dark brown skin and a small scar above her left eyebrow. She wore the same faded dress every day, its hem torn, its color washed out by too many rinses in dirty water. Her feet were bare, hardened from walking the streets. Life in the orphanage was hard. The children ate only once a day, a watery porridge shared among too many mouths. The caretaker, worn down by poverty herself, often snapped in frustration. For Ada, hunger was not the worst part. It was the emptiness of having no one who truly cared whether she laughed or cried. Yet Ada carried something inside her that hunger could not crush. She had a voice. When the other children whimpered at night, clutching their stomachs, she would sing softly old Igbo lullabies her mother once sang before death claimed her too soon. Her voice was warm and clear, rising gently in the silence. For a few minutes the hunger seemed to fade, and the children drifted to sleep with faint smiles on their faces. But singing did not fill her belly. Most mornings Ada would slip out through the back gate when the caretaker wasn't looking. She roamed the streets, searching for food in dustbins or waiting by roadside stalls for scraps. Some days she found nothing, On those nights, she lay awake on her bunk, her stomach twisting like fire. Still, she did not stop singing. It was her one treasure, her shield against despair. On this particular day, the heat was heavy, and Ada's throat was dry. She wandered further than usual, past markets and busy roads, her eyes searching for anything to eat. A sweet peel, a crust of bread, anything. Hunger gnawed at her until her legs felt weak. When she stumbled upon a quiet street lined with tall palm trees, she paused. At the end stood a mansion with white walls shining like marble, and golden gates taller than any she had seen. Through a small crack in the fence near the back, she spotted movement. Her heart skipped. Mansions often meant bins filled with food. Biting her lip, Ada pushed herself closer. She squeezed through the opening, her skinny frame sliding past broken bricks. She did not know it yet, but what she would find inside that compound would change her life forever. Ada's breath quickened as she tiptoed across the grass, her eyes darting toward the bins near the side of the mansion. She prayed no one would see her. Hunger had pushed her here. She expected to grab a scrap and vanish. But halfway across the yard, she froze. By the garden's center sat a boy in a wheelchair. He was about her age, his brown skin pale from too many days indoors. His arms rested on the chair's handles, his head bent as though the weight of the world pressed on him. The sight startled her, not just because he was rich, but because he looked even sadder than the children in her orphanage. Ada's first instinct was to run. If he shouted, the guards would come, and she would be dragged out like a thief. But something in his eyes made her pause. They were hollow, distant, yet filled with the kind of pain she understood all too well. Her lips parted before she could stop herself. Quietly, she began to sing. It was a lullaby her mother used to hum on stormy nights. Nwa moma, chisiaik. Her voice was soft, trembling at first, but the notes floated gently across the yard. The boy stirred. His head lifted slowly, and his eyes found her. Ada nearly choked on fear, but then she saw it, the corners of his mouth twitching. His fingers tapped faintly against the armrest, following her rhythm. For the first time in months, Chinedu smiled. Ada's heart pounded. She had not meant to do this, yet her song had reached him. Emboldened, she sang louder, her voice carrying warmth into the silent garden. Chinedu's chest rose and fell sharply, then to Ada's amazement, a small laugh escaped his lips. Tears pricked her eyes. She had sung many times for hungry orphans, but never had her voice broken through such deep sorrow. Just then, heavy footsteps echoed from the marble path. Ada's song faltered. A woman stood in the doorway of the garden, her eyes blazing. It was Ngozi, Chinedu's mother. Her gaze shot from her son's sudden laughter to the ragged girl standing barefoot on the grass. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "How did you get in here?" Ada's knees buckled. She dropped to the ground, trembling. "Please, madam," she whispered, "I didn't come to steal. I only wanted him to smile." For a heartbeat, the garden was silent. Then Ngozi's voice rang out, sharp as glass. "Hoot! Guards!" she shouted. "Who let this girl into my compound?" Two uniformed men appeared from the corridor, their boots pounding against the tiles. Ada trembled on her knees, clutching her torn dress, her heart thudding like a drum. She had been caught. Hunger had led her here, and now she would be dragged out like a criminal. But before the guards reached her, a sound stopped them. "Mother!" Chinedu's voice, weak yet urgent, broke the air. His hands gripped the sides of his wheelchair, his eyes wide. "Don't hurt her!" Ngozi spun around. For weeks her son had refused to speak more than a word, yet now his voice carried across the garden. "She was singing for me," he said, his breath shaky. She made me laugh." Ngozi's stern expression faltered. Her son's cheeks were flushed, his lips curved in a smile she had not seen since before the accident. She turned slowly back to Ada, whose small frame quivered in the dust. "What is your name, child?" Ngozi asked, her tone softer, but still edged with suspicion. "Ada," she whispered, her head bowed. "And where are your parents?" Ada swallowed hard. Dead. I live in an orphanage. Sometimes I run out to find food. Behind her, Chinedu's voice broke again. Mama, please, let her come back. She makes me happy. Ngozi closed her eyes, her chest heavy. She raised a hand, signaling the guards to step back. You will leave today, she said firmly. But you may return tomorrow. Only under my eyes. Ada gasped. Relief and fear mingled on her face. She nodded quickly, whispering, Yes, madam. Thank you. And in that moment, a door creaked open in the mansion of sorrow, small, uncertain, but real. The next morning, Ada returned, her heart pounding as she approached the mansion's tall gates. The guards frowned but stepped aside when Ngozi's voice called from inside. Let her in. Ada's bare feet brushed the cool marble of the corridor as she was led to the garden. There sat Chinedu, waiting. His wheelchair faced the sunlight, but his eyes were restless, searching. When he spotted her, his face lit up in a way that startled even the maid standing nearby. You came back, he said softly. Ada lowered her gaze and nodded. If madam allows, I will sing again. Ngozi stood at the edge of the garden, her arms folded, her eyes sharp. Every note, every gesture was under her watch. Ada's throat tightened, but when she saw Chinedu's hopeful face, she drew a deep breath and began to sing. Her voice rose steady and clear, carrying across the compound like a gentle breeze. It was not polished like a trained singer's, but it was alive, rich with honesty. Chinedu's fingers tapped the armrest, then his palms clapped softly. His laughter bubbled out, weak at first, then stronger. The mansion, once silent, seemed to lean forward to listen. The cook hummed along in the kitchen. A maid paused her sweeping and smiled. Even one of the guards shifted, his stern face softening as the boy's joy spilled out. Day after day, Ada came back. Sometimes she sang in the garden, sometimes in the sitting room where Chinedu liked to watch the sunlight through the curtains. With each visit, the boy's laughter grew louder. He began to ask for songs, to tell her which ones he liked best. Sing the butterfly song, he would say, remembering the days he and his sister chased them in the garden. And Ada would sing until his laughter filled the house like a bell. Ngozi watched in silence, her heart torn between caution and awe. She could not deny what her eyes saw. This ragged girl was drawing her son back from the shadows. Still, she refused to let down her guard completely. But for the first time in years, music and laughter danced together inside the walls of the mansion. Even at night, when the house grew still, echoes of joy seemed to linger. And though neither Ada nor Ngozi could see it yet, something fragile but powerful was being planted, a bond that would change all their lives. As Ada's visits became routine, Ngozi's heart wrestled with questions she dared not voice. Who was this girl, really? Why had she wandered into their compound? Could her intentions be trusted? Ngozi had seen too much loss to be careless now. Chinedu's smile had returned, yes, but she could not let her guard down. And so quietly she began to test Ada. At the dining table, Ngozi instructed the maids to serve more food than usual. Bowls of jollof rice and steaming plantain filled the table. Chinedu clapped with delight, urging Ada to sit with them. The girl's eyes widened at the sight of so much food. For a moment, her hands trembled. Ngozi watched closely. Would she eat greedily? Would she hide something in her dress to take away? But Ada simply folded her hands, whispered a shaky prayer of thanks, and ate slowly, savoring each bite. When she was offered more, she shook her head. Later, Ngozi asked the staff to keep small valuables in plain sight. A purse on the sofa, a bracelet near the kitchen doorway. Each time, Ada passed them without a glance. Instead, she busied herself with Chinedu, humming softly or fetching him water when he coughed. The guards whispered among themselves. This one is different, one said. She has nothing, yet she takes nothing. Still, Ngozi was not convinced. One afternoon, she called Ada aside. Child, why do you keep coming back? You know we could chase you away any day. Ada lowered her gaze. Because he needs me, and because when he laughs, I feel alive too. The honesty in her tone unsettled Ngozi. She had expected excuses or flattery, not words that mirrored her own yearning for her son's happiness. Meanwhile, Chinedu blossomed. He began to tease the maids, to hum while Ada sang, even to ask for his books again. The boy who once sat like stone now leaned forward eagerly, his eyes bright. Each evening after Ada left, Ngozi would sit alone in her room. She replayed the day in her mind, Ada's humility at the table, her restraint, her care for Chinedu. Piece by piece, the suspicion in her heart loosened. Perhaps this girl was not here by chance. Perhaps she had been sent, in her poverty and song, to do what riches could not. Night had fallen, and the mansion lay under a heavy hush. The maids had retired to their quarters, and the guards paced quietly at the gate. Inside, Chinedu sat in his wheelchair by the window, staring into the darkness. Ada had finished singing for him that evening, but as she prepared to leave, she noticed something different in his face. His eyes glistened, and his lips trembled as though holding back words. "Chinedu?" she asked gently. His voice cracked. "Why did God take her and not me?" Ada froze. She knew who he meant: Chinaza, his twin sister. The wound he never spoke of had broken open. "I was there too," he whispered, tears spilling. "The car crashed and I couldn't move. I watched her. I watched Papa. But I lived. Why me? Why not all of us together?" His sobs shook the room. Ngozi rushed in at the sound. She dropped to her knees beside him, clutching his hands. "Nina, stop, please," she begged. But her words could not reach him. His grief boiled over, raw and uncontrollable. He thrashed weakly in the chair, shouting, "I want her back! I want my sister!" Ngozi's tears fell, helpless. For months she had prayed for him to speak, but now the pain spilling from his mouth was more than she could bear. Then Ada stepped forward. She placed a trembling hand on Chinedu's shoulder and began to sing. Her voice was low at first, almost drowned by his sobs, but slowly it rose, steady and strong. It was not a lively tune this time, but a hymn about finding rest in sorrow, one her mother had sung when storms shook the orphanage roof. The melody wrapped around the room like warm cloth. Chinedu's cries softened. His chest heaved, but his breathing slowed. His hands unclenched, and his head rested against the wheelchair. A faint hum escaped his lips, joining her song. Ngozi stared in disbelief. She had begged, pleaded, but it was Ada's voice that reached him, cutting through the grief like light through a shuttered window. When the song ended, Chinedu's tears still glistened, but his face was calm. He whispered, "Thank you, Ada." In that moment, Ngozi's suspicions shattered. She saw clearly this girl was not an intruder. She was her son's healer, the one who had carried him where wealth and medicine could not. The morning after Chinedu's grief had broken like a storm, Ngozi lay awake long after dawn. Ada's song still echoed in her mind. For months she had lived in helplessness, watching her son fade. Yet this barefoot girl had reached him in ways she could not. But who really was Ada? Could a child from the streets be trusted in their lives forever? Ngozi needed answers. By midday, she summoned her driver. "Take me to the orphanage she comes from," she ordered. The car rattled through Lagos traffic and turned into a dusty side street. At its end stood a crumbling building with faded paint and rusted iron gates. The sign above it, once bold, now peeled in strips. St. Mary's Orphanage. Inside, Ngozi's chest tightened. Dozens of children crowded the dim hall. Some dozed against cracked walls, their ribs showing. A boy clutched an empty plate as though hoping food might appear, while a girl rocked a doll made of rags. A weary caretaker greeted her, surprise etched across her face at seeing a woman so finely dressed. "You're here for Ada, aren't you?" the woman asked. Ngozi nodded slowly. The caretaker sighed. "She sneaks out most days. I can't stop her. She goes looking for scraps, then returns at night to sleep on her bunk. I fear one day she won't come back at all." Ngozi's eyes swept the room. She saw Ada's empty bed, a thin mattress with a torn sheet, and her heart clenched. She imagined her own son living like this, without comfort, without hope. "She sings for the children sometimes," the caretaker added. "Her voice calms them when hunger makes them cry. That girl has a gift. Ngozi felt tears sting her eyes. All this time she had watched Ada in suspicion, waiting for her to fail. But standing here, surrounded by children fighting for survival, she understood the truth. Ada had not come to their mansion to take, she had come only to give. On the drive back, Ngozi sat in silence, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The city whirled outside, but her mind was fixed. She had lost a husband and daughter, nearly lost her son, and now perhaps God was placing another child in her path. For the first time since the accident, she felt certain of what must be done. Weeks passed, and the mansion no longer echoed with silence. Instead, music and laughter flowed through its corridors like fresh air. Chinedu's face had regained color, his voice carried cheer, and Ada's songs had become a daily rhythm in the household. Ngozi knew it was time. She could not keep this change hidden behind golden gates. And so she planned a Thanksgiving, not for wealth or business, but for life restored. On the appointed day, the mansion courtyard bloomed with color. White canopies fluttered in the breeze. Guests arrived in lace and agbadas, their voices rising in greetings and laughter. Drummers sat cross-legged by the gate, their hands beating rhythms that sent hips swaying and feet tapping. Trays of steaming jollof rice, fried chicken, and puff-puff filled the air with fragrance. At the center sat Chinedu, dressed proudly in a cream senator outfit with matching cap. His wheelchair was polished, but his smile was what drew the most attention. Relatives and neighbors gathered around whispering, "Look at him, he's laughing again." Beside him stood Ada. Gone was the torn dress. She wore a bright Ankara frock with neat sandals, her hair tied with a ribbon. She held her hands shyly, her eyes wide at the crowd, but when Chinedu teased her, she burst into a grin. Ngozi arrived last, radiant in a gold-lace gown and gel that shimmered under the sun. She walked to the front, her steps measured, her heart steady. When she raised her hand, the courtyard fell silent. "My friends," she began, her voice firm yet thick with emotion. "Today I thank God not for riches, but for mercy. I lost my husband. I lost my daughter. And for many months, I thought I had lost my son too, not to death, but to sorrow. But look at him now." She gestured to Chinedu, whose smile widened under the applause. Tears welled in her eyes as she turned to Ada. This girl who came with nothing gave us what money and doctors could not. She brought laughter back to this house. She brought my son back to life. Guests murmured in awe. Some clapped, others wiped their eyes. Ngozi paused, her gaze sweeping across the gathering. The moment had come, the decision already carved into her heart. "Today," she declared, "you will all witness something greater than Thanksgiving. You will witness family reborn." The courtyard hushed. Even the drummers lowered their hands, waiting. Ngozi stood tall, her gold-lace gown glinting under the afternoon sun. Beside her, Ada shifted nervously, her fingers twisting the ribbon on her dress. Ngozi's voice carried strong and clear. "For months I doubted her. I thought she was just another hungry child sneaking into a rich man's house. But I was wrong. Ada came not to take, but to give. She gave my son joy, and through her voice she healed what money could not." She turned toward Chinedu. His eyes brimmed with tears as he nodded, urging her on. Ngozi lifted Ada's hand. The girl trembled, her heart racing. She had never stood before so many people, never imagined herself the center of such honor. "From this day," Ngozi said, her voice breaking slightly, "Ada is no longer just a visitor. She is my daughter. She is Chinedu's sister. She is family." The courtyard erupted. Women ululated, men clapped, children shouted with joy. Some guests wiped their eyes, moved by the sight of a wealthy woman embracing a child who had once searched dustbins for scraps. Ada's knees gave way, and she knelt at Ngozi's feet, tears streaming. "Thank you, Mama," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I will never forget this." Ngozi pulled her up and wrapped her in a tight embrace. "No, my daughter. You owe me nothing. We owe God everything." Chinedu clapped loudly, his laughter carrying above the cheers. "My sister!" he cried, reaching for Ada's hand. She ran to him, gripping it tightly, and together they smiled through their tears. The drummers struck their instruments again, this time with renewed vigor. Guests danced, servants clapped, and the air swelled with celebration. The mansion that once groaned under silence now shook with music, laughter, and life. As the evening sun painted the sky orange, Ngozi looked at her two children, one born of her womb, the other given by grace. She felt her heart lighter than it had been since the accident. Wealth had not saved them. Doctors had failed them. But kindness, born from the voice of a hungry girl, had restored them. And so the story closed with a truth that lingered in every guest's heart. Riches may build houses, but it is love that makes a home.